world saw drastic transformation during the early 20th century. The Great War, also known as World War I, began in 1914. However, the United States did not see the battlefield until 1917. The war dominated the world spectrum. Over 100 countries were involved in the massive, barbaric, gut-wrenching, and blood-curdling brawl. The Homefront played an instrumental role in the success of the United States during World War I. With the help of a motivated president and a community that was willing to sacrifice, the Homefront of America was able to support troops with weapons, food, and love.
During World War I, there was a high demand for soldiers, and to meet this demand, Congress passed the Selective Service Act on May 18 of 1917. All men between the ages of 21 and 30 had to register for military service. Within just a few months, 10 million people had registered. At the end of it all, roughly 2.8 million of the 4.8 million who served had been drafted. The government took further actions to ensure that everyone in America promoted the war and that no one was spreading bad anti-war messages. The Espionage Act was passed in June of 1917. It insinuated penalties of up to 21 years in jail or fines of $10,000 for interfering with military recruitment. In addition, it authorized the Postmaster General to remove anything from the mail considered treasonable or seditious. The Sedition Act, passed in May after the Espionage Act, prohibited any false statements that interfered with the prosecution of war, insulting or abusing the United States government, flag, constitution, or military, preventing or criticizing the production of necessary materials for war, and encouraging or teaching any of such behaviors. The penalties for behaving as such were the same as those for the Espionage Act. These acts forced the American population to be positive toward the war, and consequently, the United States became a country fully supported by its population. Many organizations were created during the Homefront movement in order to increase efficiency, involve the public, and assist the overall resources of the war. One important group that was established was the Committee on Public Information, or CPI. This committee was declared by President Wilson. Wilson believed that it is not an army we must shape and train for war, it is a nation. And he supported the notion that if the public was educated about the war, the victory would come easier. A journalist and former worker on Wilson's campaigns, George Creel was appointed head to CPI.
So essentially, the purpose of the Committee on Public Information was to use propaganda to rile up the American population and get them in support of the war. George Creel, the head of the Committee on Public Information, thought that the committee should focus on using big, ringing statements rather than persecuting war oppositionists. He also used 4-minute men who were designated with the task of relaying information to the public to excite them about the war. Posters were also used, many propaganda posters, and these helped to make the American population strongly in favor of the war.
Many different strategies to conserve food supply were implemented on the Homefront. A significant reason to why the Allies won the war was due to careful conservation of vitals such as water and food. The strain on the food supply forced President Wilson in May 1917 to establish the Food Administration, which was under the guidance of future President Herbert Hoover. Hoover followed his mantra of "food will win the war" and believed that regardless of politics, starving people should be fed. He encouraged different forms of rationing, such as substituting ingredients in recipes like corn for wheat and sweets without sugar. Victory gardens were often worked by farmerettes, who were part of a Women's Land Army of America. To become a farmerette, you had to be at least 17 and wore uniforms and straw hats. This particular job gave women the experience of outdoor work, a life beyond the inside enclosed housewife duties. Victory gardens sprang up everywhere, even on the White House lawn, inspiring citizens everywhere to participate in the Homefront effort.
So to further support the war effort, the Food Administration was created, and that was led by Herbert Hoover. And he was a very influential man. He actually, his program was completely voluntary. There were never any legal actions, legal rations in the United States, but he still He promoted meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays, and he actually got the American population to reduce food consumption by 15%. And he was very dedicated to increasing production with victory gardens and such, and decreasing consumption so that these could help the soldiers who were fighting in the war at the time.
Now, one of the other changes that we saw with World War I was the United States government was trying to make an effort to basically infiltrate the American industries. And when I say that, I mean, you know, you have a production, okay? And a prime example of this can be taken for Henry Ford, okay? This man is making money. Let's face it, he's making a car that people want. People need it. But what the United States government managed to do is they came in and they basically said, look, Henry, you're doing a great thing, but we need something from you. And although Henry Ford was essentially opposed to the World War I, he was forced to change his production from cars, which were bringing in income for himself, and he was forced to make tanks and other automobiles that will be used for the war. Now, as can be inferred from what we've just heard, as the car industry was changing because of World War I, this was also progressing into other industries. It was a huge, a monumental change. It was, I mean, this is America's industries. This is the income of working people now changing their ways in order to support a war effort. This now is no longer just a government thing. It's no longer just individuals. This is a nation behind its troops, behind its government, pushing forward and getting that edge in war, which would essentially lead to an American victory.
Another major organization that impacted World War I was the founding of the Red Cross. The Red Cross at the beginning of the war was predominantly neutral, and its mission was to provide ships with emergency kits and medical workers. From there, it grew to one of the most important volunteer groups in America. Women were seen as the backbone of Red Cross. Women performed duties like nurses and doctors. They also did countless fundraising events, such as parades, to finance the Red Cross, gaining over $400 million civilian dollars. Red Cross began as a small organization dedicated to help cure the sick and the injured, but became, after the war, a great humanitarian organization who was a key player to defeating the influenza epidemic of 1918. Women's involvement in the war, which included more than their participation in the Red Cross, changed their societal role as well.
So, what we saw with World War I was essentially a huge transformation in the way that women were perceived in society. You see, before World War I, it was very straightforward and simple for a woman. They could be a secretary, possibly a teacher if they're lucky, but mostly they were stay-at-home moms. Their jobs were to take care of the children. They were to run the household. However, during the time of World War I came a change. Okay? We had men going overseas. They were leaving their posts at jobs. Therefore, there was a slowdown in the production in the United States. We had factory lines that were not functioning. We had food shortages. We needed a change. And that came in the form of women. That's why we come up with these new things and we have women working in society. Because when the men left, they were there to pick up the slack, and therefore they stepped into the place where they can now be seen in today's role. Essentially, we view World War I as this thing that changed everything. Because now you see society in the way it is. Women back then were working on tanks. They were riveting together machines. They were fixing together automobiles. It's insane that, you could go overseas and fight with a weapon that was manufactured by your wife. This was something completely new.
The emergence of rapid work in factories and the abandoned jobs left behind by the white men who went to war created jobs for the African Americans who would migrate from the South to seek work in factories in the North. African Americans were still treated poorly, but the pay and some conditions were far better than before. One African American man who migrated north for work quoted, "Negroes are not so greatly disturbed about wages. They are tired of being treated as children. They want to be men." The work on the Homefront allowed African Americans for the first time to feel a part of their country and humanized rather than victimized.
The United States was transformed by the war experience. World War I had significant social, cultural, political, and economic effects on society. During wartime, American citizens were forced to make significant sacrifices. The rationing of food and supplies changed daily lifestyle, but more importantly, the loss of loved ones transformed the family dynamic. Women soon found themselves working more than ever before. They started to prove their worth in contributing more to the economy and gained respect. African American life also transformed during World War I. As more and more blacks transitioned from southern farm labor to higher paying industrial jobs, their culture changed. Although it was a tragedy, World War I was a time of immense opportunity and social advancement for many Americans.
This is the home front, and we're in the hood. This is the home front, and we always do the things good. This is the home front, we've got your back. This is the home front, and we always pick up all of the slack.
Yay! WSCC!
West Side Piano Club.